So much, Steve. We really appreciate you joining us actually for the second time. You're very much appreciated. And Steve is the editor of California Political Review. And if you're not signed up and you don't get his emails, typically at 3 o'clock in the morning, but you must have been sleeping, Steve, because we couldn't
9 o'clock today.
early this morning. So.
Well, actually, it was a technical problem on the website, but tomorrow morning we'll be back at 3 a.m.
Okay, that's terrific. And let me just introduce really quickly our panelists that you see on your screen. Now, you know Wendy Brukwinski, our first VP, and joining us today is Ken Olafson. He's a member of SVARW, and he graciously volunteered to help us with questions when Steve is completed his talk. And I just want to take a minute, or not a minute, not even a minute, just to remind people of our upcoming events. We have the luncheon, Casa Lupe, support local business. It's on our website. Bring your chair, order your takeout, sit outside. And this is Campbell. Let's see if the Campbell police show up, but they shouldn't. Okay, and then June 12th, we have the Global Economic Armageddon with Steve Rice and Jan Hunreiser. And then on June 24th, many of you who read the Epoch Times will recognize Josh Phillips' name. He's an investigative reporter. He's very fascinating. He has many YouTube videos out there, and he's going to be talking about does China owe us or own us? So we're looking forward to that. And we really thank all of our sponsors and members who make these programs possible. So thank you so much. And now I'm going to turn this over to Wendy. No, I'm actually going to turn it over to Ken, who bravely 30 seconds ago had so much information on Steve Frank that we said, why don't you just introduce him? So,
well,
Ken?
Hi, Steve. Good to meet you online. For those of our members who are unaware of Steve's activities, he publishes the California Political Review, capoliticalreview.com, and his commentary, unlike many other commenters, is fact-filled. He provides the information that is based on, that bases his comments, and provides us with the information where we can do our own research and follow up. A great journalist, very active, and I'm pleased that he is joining us today. And with that, Steve, you have the mic.
Ken, thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction. This is a great day in America. You've all seen the results of the May unemployment notes. We're up 2.5 million employees rather than down by 8 or 9. The economy is rolling along again, and we are getting, as they predicted, as President Trump predicted, a V-shaped economic boost. Sadly, 4 states are not getting it. The states are New Jersey, New York, Illinois, and California. And the reason for all 4 of those states not enjoying the recovery is because those are the 4 states that are still pretty much totally closed down. The reason that you see something's going on in California is that cities and counties have opened up without permission of the state, forced the state to agree to the opening, and then you have numerous small business owners wanting to open their businesses and have just opened their business with or without permission of the government. I'm happy to say I was on here with you last month, and I had to apologize. I hadn't had a haircut in close to 3 months. Last week, I got a haircut, and I did it in LA County. And of course, when I got finished, I said to the barber that I'm going to put this on Facebook to let everybody know you're open. And they said, please don't do that. We're illegally open. And they were crowded, and they had lots of customers, and people want a haircut. People want to go to restaurants. People want to go about their business. But here in California, the government is standing in our way. I'd like to talk about a very serious matter this morning. Today is the 5th of June. In 10 days, on the 15th of June, by the state constitution, the legislature must bring to the governor a bill for the budget of the state of California. And it's a mandate that a bill be passed by the 15th of June to be submitted to the governor. We still do not have a budget, but interestingly enough, the governor has presented a budget with a $54 billion deficit to it, and the deficit is going to be helped, he says, because the federal government is going to cover at least $14 billion of our deficit. Even with that, the governor is cutting education, health care, and law enforcement. In fact, he's cutting law enforcement to local government by 24%. So if you think we don't have enough police now, and if you think the defund the police movement, which is moving along in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Alameda County, and Oakland, and other places in the state, imagine when the state cuts 24% from your local law enforcement. They literally are throwing us to the mob. So the governor presents his bill to do all these massive cuts, hoping the federal government will bail him out. The legislature earlier this week took his bill, threw it away, got rid of all of his cuts. We don't know how much of the deficit will be now, but they too believe that the people of Georgia and Iowa and Kansas and Vermont are going to help pay for the policies of Sacramento. That is just not going to happen. If you watch the, if you watch the press conference of President Trump earlier today, he made mention that he's going to provide a $1 trillion bill for the help of the workers and the businesses. Not a dime goes to government, and all the money will flow through the workers and the businesses. Not a dime goes to government, which means that the state of California, which is counting on a minimum of $14 billion of federal aid, is not going to get a dime of that, which means the deficit at $54 billion could be as closer to $70 billion, and that's just this year. Next year will be higher. So the state Senate put back the money for illegal aliens, put back the money for education, put back the money for health care and welfare, but did not put back the money for local law enforcement. They too are willing to cut and defund the police in the state of California. And so that's going to be a very serious problem between the governor, who wants his cuts, and the Democrat state Senate and Assembly that doesn't. Of course, the train to nowhere, the high-speed rail, is still in the budget. Monies to be help to subsidize CalPERS and CalSTRS is still in the budget, because the Democrats don't want those two to collapse. And the only way they don't collapse under these circumstances is by having a special subsidy from the state legislature and the state treasury in order to keep their doors open. Let me go to another issue that's very important to everybody, and that's the fact that, again, today is June 5th. The Oak Park schools and schools in Ventura County and other counties start opening in the first week in August, which is 2 months from now. At this point, the parents in these counties and statewide do not know yet whether the kids will be going full-time to school, part-time to school, whether they'll be going only half days to school, or if they'll be learning online and half days in school, or just learning online. Two months before school's to open, at the exact time kids are supposed to be getting their classes and enrolling for school, nothing is known by the local school districts, which say, well, we can't help you because we don't know what the state rules are going to be. And of course, the state of California hasn't decided yet whether or not to open up the schools. But we do have the word of Governor Newsom, or as I prefer to call him, the supreme leader. He has announced that the schools won't open until we have a vaccine. Well, what happens if we don't have a vaccine? Remember, it took 5 years to get a vaccine for the Ebola virus. And even though the president seems very confident that we will have a vaccine before the end of the year, can we wait till September or October to make a decision as to when the schools are going to be opened? If we have the vaccine by then, will the kids be able to get the vaccine in time? Or is this going to be another semester of non-education by California government schools? The interesting news is, of course, we're watching, and it's all anecdotal now, but parents in Los Angeles and in some of the urban areas have already made the determination to move out of state for job purposes as well as education purposes for their kids. The most productive people are not going to wait for Governor Newsom to decide when the schools are going to be open. They want their kids to have an education today. And so that's not happening. Let's talk a little bit about the political climate in the state of California. Yesterday, PPIC presented a poll, and PPIC is one of the most respected polling companies in the state. It's a nonprofit that talks about public policy issues, but they also have a polling component. Last week, they were in the field with their polls. It was a margin of error of 3.5, and it was a well-done poll. The methodology was by the book, so it's a legitimate poll. And here's the bad news. As you all know, we're trying to work to win back 7 congressional seats. We have already won back one of the 7 in my home district, the 25th, with Mike Garcia, winning over Christy Smith. But Christy Smith is running against Garcia again in November, and that's going to be an interesting race because the PPIC poll shows that in every single race that we're targeting, whether it be Young Kim, Greg Rath, whether it would be Michelle Steele or Mike Garcia running for re-election, or our candidate Brian Mayotte against Levin down in San Diego. In every case, the Republican candidate is a minimum of 8 points behind the Democrat. Even Garcia, who just won his seat a few weeks ago, he's already 8 points behind in the PPIC poll. Sadly, the people of California with a 65% margin think that Governor Newsom is doing a good job. And I would doubt if there's a single one of the 77 participants on this call that would agree with that. But the people are agreeing with it. And shockingly, a majority of Californians still agree with the concept of shelter in place, even though it's obvious now through the great growth of Georgia, Florida, Texas, Tennessee, and other states that closed late, opened early, are almost totally open. They're having great economic renewal, and California is still in the throes of a depression. People still believe it's okay to shelter in place. The problem, I believe, and this is just my opinion, is that folks have been so beaten down by the thought, if you meet another person, they might give you the deadly disease, the coronavirus. I heard a young child going into the second grade, afraid to go back to school because they were afraid of catching the death just by going to school. We're growing a generation of kids that will be fearful of other kids. As I like to say, there's only three winners out of all this: big government, attorneys who are going to sue, and therapists who are going to have a lifetime of new patients who are now 5, 6, 7, and 8 years old, who are going to be fearful of living in a world with other people. And that's what the media and the politicians have done to our young, made them fearful. So the PPIC poll is not good news for us, except in the area of taxation. As you know, there's going to be a split roll tax proposal on the November ballot to amend Prop 13 to allow unfettered increases in commercial and industrial properties by amending the Prop 13. Happily, I can report that the PPIC poll shows 60% of the people opposed to any tax increase, whether it be a bond measure, whether it be a sales tax increase, or the change in the split roll. And so one of the most confusing matters for me and friends of mine who study this stuff is how come the people of California are going to be voting more than 2-to-1 against Trump, want to stay home isolated, want to keep businesses down, want to create more poverty, want to close education, yet and vote for Democrats for office who've created this disaster, and at the same time vote for not to increase taxes. It is extremely confusing, but that's what the PPIC poll showed, and it's important that we know about that so that you understand how to work for your candidates for city council, school board, mayor, board of supervisors, and other local districts for the November election. Now, let me go into something that occurred last night so that you understand where we are in the state. About 9-10 months ago, two groups formed a recall effort. And the recall effort was to recall Governor Newsom, and they tried. One group did not submit any signatures at all, and the other did submit 300,000 signatures, but they needed 1.5 million. There was no traction. There were, except for activists like us, there were few people that were angry with Governor Newsom. And so without the traction, without the anger, without the emotion, both efforts failed. I won't go into the internal problems of those efforts, but they both failed. A few months ago, a new group of people determined, and it was just before the coronavirus hit, to try another recall of Governor Newsom. Then, of course, the virus hit. Governor Newsom decided to repeal the Constitution of the United States, says no longer a guidance or the law over the people of California. We'll make our own laws. No right to go to church, no right to assemble, no right to petition government, no right to free speech, and all the other rights that are taken away from us. He attempted early to stop the sale of guns in the state, but lawsuits stopped that, and so he couldn't do that effort. But he did try, and because of that, people started getting angry with their loss of constitutional freedoms and the right to live. And so that's the climate that we're in today. There are people who own restaurants who've been destroyed. We all know that. There are people in manufacturing that have been destroyed. Over the last week or two, there have been people who've had businesses that have been looted. Riots have ensued. burning of vehicles and buildings. And by the way, in the state of California, looting is legal. If you steal under $950 worth of goods from a Big Buy or from a Costco or from a local jewelry shop, the police will do nothing, because all you could get, even if they did capture you, is a citation, and there's no way for the police to force you to go to court for a hearing and to be fined. So there's no arrest for looting. In fact, in New York, the governor of New York is now upset that in New York City, all the looters and those who burn cars and buildings have been released from jail with no bail and no charges brought against them. That's how bad it is in New York. Here in California, we have some charges, but I would expect most of those are going to be dropped. And so the atmosphere for a recall is much different today than it was back in earlier this year and late last year. So last night there was a conference call with over 700 people on a virtual town hall. I was honored to be the moderator and one of the presenters of that town hall. The other speakers were Tom Del Beccaro and Mark Mauser, the attorney. And we have joined with a man by the name of Orrin Heatley and his team to create a recall of Governor Newsom. And you can go to recallgavin2020.com, recallgavin2020.com. And over the last 3 months, Orrin's team has been working with the Secretary of State and attorneys to get approval for the recall to be able to go onto the streets for signatures. And it is our understanding that sometime today, we will get the go-ahead from the Secretary of State's office to start the distribution of the recall petitions against Gavin Newsom. And these folks have not been wasting time waiting for the Attorney General and the Secretary of State to operate. They've built a website, recallgavin2020.com, and you could go to that website now. You can volunteer to be a county chair, a regional chair, a community chair, a signature gatherer to help us with social media, etc. But the big news is they've also are able to, once we get the approval from the Secretary of State, which we hope is today, that they will be able, you will be able to go to recallgavin2020.com and download the petition and print it out on your home computer and your home printer, and you'll be able to get, and there will be two types of petitions, one with 5 spots for signatures and one with 10 spots for signatures. You could sign it and you could send it to the address at the bottom of the petition where it's going to be counted and verified before we send it into the registrar of voters in each of the 58 counties. So this is a very exciting movement on behalf of the volunteers of the state of California. It is well organized, it is well conceived, and this time there is the anger of the actions of Governor Newsom to repeal the Constitution in the state of California. And let me not forget to remind you, he's also killed hundreds of thousands of jobs with his signature on AB 5 that doesn't allow people to take part-time jobs, work on behalf of themselves when they want to and when they can, when they feel like it, rather than working for a company and having to report 8 to 5 every day. He has taken away that option for people, for the young, the inexperienced, the unskilled, those who are trying to come back into the job force with part-time to earn a little extra money. He's taken that away. And so while we'll have a ballot measure in November to overturn a major portion of that, we still are being harmed by the governor, and we know his intent. So the recall movement is going along. And one other matter, just so everyone understands, everybody involved, from Del Beccaro to Musa to myself to Oren, everybody else, we are all volunteering our services to make this happen. There are no paid consultants, no paid strategists, no paid PR people. You're going to start seeing in the next day or so a lot of media coverage of the recall. So this is happening. One last thing before I open up with questions. I also want to note that Mark Musa and Harmeet Dillon have filed, as of yesterday, a total of 14 lawsuits against the governor in the state of California for taking away our rights, our constitutional rights, as well as our rights to do business in the state of California. So far, there's a total of 14 lawsuits that they have and are working on. This is a very tough time for the state of California, but for those of us who are activists, there's no reason to say I have nothing to do. At a minimum, you could work on a city council race, on a congressional race. You can work to get signatures for the recall. We urge you to do that. Just go to recallgavin2020.com and sign up. But this is a good time for activists because there's a lot that needs to be done, and we are on the cutting edge of possibly turning back the state of California into a legitimate government and into a state that respects the rights of people, where we believe in the people while the Democrats believe in government. Thank you very much, Ken and Jan and everyone. Look forward to answering your questions.
Thanks, Steve. Always very interesting. And I think Ken's going to join us here momentarily, but I wanted to get in with the first question. Yesterday, we had like within a couple miles of where I live, 6 fires set by arsonists. Who is behind this and what are they doing? You wrote an article about that.
That's correct. There's arson going on all over the state. Small fires, large fires. It's obviously, and you asked the question, what's behind it? Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like connecting the dots. So there's a fire 2 miles from your home. Who shows up? The fire department. Who shows up with the fire department? The police, right? Well, so the police and the fire department are trying to put out a fire, control traffic, and making sure people are safe. So in other areas of the community and the region, the looters and those who are doing the other crimes are free because they know the cops are too busy. And that seems to be what's going on statewide. We had a similar situation here in Simi Valley a few days ago. I had lunch with a city council member 2 days ago, and he was explaining to me how criminals used a fire as cover to get the police. We have a small police force in Simi Valley, and use the police force to go cover the fire to free up the criminals from fear of being captured quickly.
So this is all orchestrated.
Totally orchestrated. It's not a happenstance. It's not a coincidence. It's not the winds. It's not the Santa Ana winds, as they love to say. It is a coordinated effort, not for the purpose of arson for the sake of just, gee whiz, I like to burn things down, but as a cover for other crimes.
Sad. Ken?
Yes, Steve, we have a question from one of our members. If the state of California requests a bailout from the federal government and does not receive it, will the public employees' retirement pensions be at risk?
I'm glad that question was brought up. The first part is, there are 2 parts to an answer. First part is no, they won't be at risk because the state of California has determined that the first monies goes to CalPERS and CalSTRS. But that means other areas of the state have to be cut. But I'm glad that question was raised Because there's been an issue. As you know, private business has cut back the salaries of workers and executives and all. Yesterday, the state Senate president, Tony Atkins, made a statement: we will not cut the pay of any state employee, regardless of the deficit situation. So state employees are going to continue to receive full pay, whether or not they work. I mentioned earlier about working with the Orrin Heatley and the others, working with the Secretary of State's office to finalize our petition for recall. We expected that was going to be done on Tuesday or Wednesday, a couple, 3 days ago, but it wasn't. And the reason why was due to the protests. All the downtown Sacramento offices of the state government and the downtown LA, San Francisco, Fresno, and other state offices in urban areas were closed for 2 days. The workers still got full pay.
Wow. If I can follow up on your comments on the recent polling results. I've noticed in some of the reports that the number of people who are taxpayers and those that aren't, is the balance is, it seems to be tipping towards more voters are not paying taxes than those of us that are. How is that polling going to end up affecting our ability to make changes?
Well, the bigger issue, Ken, is those taxpayers who are receiving government entitlements and government programs, plus those individuals that are no longer paying taxes and get what's called an earned income credit and get money back for not paying taxes. And the cumulative of that is, as I understand, somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% of the people in the state of California. So approximately 40% of the voters in the state of California. And it does hurt because you're telling people, hey, you're getting freebies. You don't have to work so hard. And of course, you also have, at the same time, the federal government with their program of $600 a week extra until July 31st for not working. And so all of these things add up to people saying, hey, government's helping me, why not? Nancy Pelosi came up with her idea of $2,000 per month per taxpayer or per person, regardless if they're here legally or illegally. Everyone on this call, $2,000. Every illegal alien a mile from your home, $2,000 a month, forever. And so a basic income floor. Who pays for that? And why would you vote against Pelosi if she's going to give you $2,000 a month?
That is criminal. Okay, I have a question here from Marilyn Galley. Most parents do not want their child to have a vaccine. Are vaccines going to be mandated?
The direct answer at this moment, we don't know. What we do know is that the Superintendent of Public Instruction for the state of California, Tony Thurman, has said that when the vaccine is available, a child without being vaccinated may not attend a school.
Wow.
Boon for homeschoolers.
Well, what's going to happen is those parents will just move out of state.
Yeah, like so many others. Ken, did you have a question?
We have a question from Jacqueline, back to the fire and arsonists. 2 felons were caught, but are they just going to be released under the catch and release policy that the police seem to have?
And what's the difference, Ken, between an arsonist and a bass or a halibut? Just catch and release. And the answer is, sadly, yes, they are going to be released. That has become a major scandal. The number in Fresno County, 12.5, according to Sheriff Mims, 12.5% of those who have been released under this catch and release program have recommitted crimes. And her deputies can no longer do other work other than recapturing those who are recommitting crimes who have been released previously.
Yes.
So, go ahead.
Go ahead, Wendy.
Oh, no, we just had a question here from Mike Rogers. He wanted to know, what can we do to turn Orange County congressional races around? How can we help? What should we do?
Get the Republican Party on the stick and start registering voters. While we're sitting here talking, while the people are campaigning, the Democrats are out there day in, day out, registering voters, preparing for their ballot harvesting effort, and the Republican Party is not registering voters. The official policy of the state Republican Party is not to register voters. Now, they'll tell you they're registering voters, so we ask the question, where are you doing it? Where are you spending the money on it? And there's no money being spent on voter registration. It's not enough to say you want it, you got to do it. And we've not done voter registration in the state of California by the Republican Party since March of 2013, except for the month of September of 2019, where they registered a total of 400 people statewide. They didn't even have their heart in it.
400?
I did not stutter.
Okay, do you think these grassroots taking back your central committee efforts that I've been hearing about, how effective do you think they're going to be in taking back CGOP?
I have been monitoring it county by county
Yeah.
for several months now. I was involved with projects in numerous counties to make sure good people filed, because the first step is to file. And a lot of counties did that. And I think some counties will flip back to Republicanism on their central committee from laziness. And I'm trying to be kind. When we have it in December and January, we have the reorganization of the committees. The problem is, in most cases, the current bad people running the committees are not even inviting the new people who have been elected to the meetings. I did not know you were one. And you would think that if somebody ran and they actually got elected, they would be serving. Gee whiz, a great training opportunity. Have them come to the meetings, see how things are being done, start integrating you, Wendy, and others into the process, even though you're not sworn in yet, because that's the right thing to do. We're all volunteers. And who cares whether you are a sworn member of the committee or a non-sworn member who will shortly be sworn in? You should be able to work with the committee. And county after county, including my home county, we just don't seem to have that connection yet. And they really don't. And this is what I said. I have said that the 2020 election is going to be the last election where the Republican Party is relevant in the state of California. And one reason for that is that they literally don't want to register voters. They don't want to have candidates coming from the community. They want hand-picked establishment candidates throughout the state. And that's what they get, and they lose with them. And then they wonder why, and then they don't run the committees. Years ago, we used to have the state party give assistance to the counties to work. When Jim Brutti became chairman, he said, I don't want to give welfare to the counties. You raise your own money, you do your own thing. He cut off all the counties. That destroyed a vast majority of counties, because instead of weaning people away from that, he just cut them off at the knees, just cut them off without any warning, without any assistance to be able to be weaned away from it. So now we have counties that barely have enough money to keep their headquarters open, but we have lots of volunteers looking for things to do. And the first thing a volunteer should be asked to do, Wendy, is to register voters. That's the first thing. The second thing a volunteer should be asked to do is GOTV, get out the vote. And the third thing a volunteer should be asked to do is to help educate the public as to Republican principles by going to community groups, by going to town halls, by going to city council meetings and board of supervisor meetings, school board meetings, and promoting our values and principles. Those are the things we should be doing. It doesn't cost any money to do those things, and they don't want to do them.
Yeah, that's true.
So we need to take it back.
They are now inviting us newly elected people to the meetings, but we're like clawing our way into trying to do anything to help with them. So we'll see where it goes. Ken, did you have a question?
Yeah, Nadia has raised the question, how is voter fraud and the changes that the California legislature is illegally ramming through going to affect the November election? I am referring to their move to mail ballots to every living person who ever had an address in the state and letting votes come in 20 days after the election. Is this insurmountable? How can we fight it? And before you answer, I'd like to add the comment that Judicial Watch has reported that they settled a lawsuit a while back with LA County that up to 20% of the registered voters no longer exist. So could you expand on that, please?
Yes. Let me first go to the issue of the all-mail ballot for November. The governor issued an executive order saying that there will be every person who is a registered voter, including the dead, including the illegal aliens, including those who have not voted since 2008, including those who have lived for the last 10 years in Texas, now get a ballot. There was a lot of legal questions about that, and to protect themselves, the Democrats put in a bill, AB 860, to codify the all-mail ballot executive order of the governor. That bill has passed the Senate committee, is now on the Senate floor, will pass there, and will pass the legislature. Here's the problem, and it goes to the second part of your question. Judicial Watch, along with their client, which was Election Integrity Project California, sued the state for having dead people and illegal people on the ballot. A federal judge ruled that cumulatively in the state of California, there are 3 million people on the ballot that should be taken off. In LA County alone, there are 485,000 people by name that have been identified as dead or moved that are still on there, and a total, according to the federal judge, of 1.5 million people in LA County, along with another 1.5 million statewide. Tuesday, I had a conversation with Ruth Weiss, the co-chair of Election Integrity Project, and I asked her the exact question: what is the status of the court order? And she says LA County and the Secretary of State have done almost nothing, and there's nothing that they could see that has been done. And so those 3 million people, over the objections of a federal judge and contempt of a court order, are still on the ballot. Still on the voter rolls. And so we do have a significant problem with voter registration. Now, there are 2 voter rolls. Now, all of you on this call are familiar with the voting roll, the actual voting rolls, but there's also an inactive voting roll, and that's where people, for instance, who haven't voted since 2008 are on, and there are many more that should be on, and those people are going to get a ballot. Imagine if you haven't voted since 2008, under state law, you're supposed to be taken off. Not in California, they keep them on, and now with all-mail balloting, those people will get a ballot. So you live in a home where there used to be a registered voter who hasn't lived there since 2010, and you throw it out. And here's a big problem that's been found, because you use a post office box. And now we're finding, anecdotally, but in several places around the country, that when absentee ballots come out, they come out In this state, 30 days before the election. In other states, different days before their election. People go to the post offices and look through the trash cans to find those ballots that have been thrown out because they're not theirs, and people don't know enough to send them back to the registrar of voters. They just trash them in the trash can at the post office, and people are now dumpster diving for those ballots to use as voting.
You know, to what you're saying, here in Santa Clara County, we were working with election integrity to audit the last election. And we went down a few times and asked them about the returned ballots. You are counting on USPS to return these things and decide who should get a ballot and who shouldn't. Is that really their job? Do they really need to pay for that? Well, we asked how many. And at first there were like cases and cases and cases. And finally, the last day we were there, this lady that works there pointed to a room and said that room is full and there are too many to count. We're counting on USPS and how many get past them that are actually voted. And then they say, don't worry about it because we do a signature verification. It is so loosey-goosey, you wouldn't believe it. That's awful.
Well, now, because of the coronavirus, there is no observable signature verification. As Ruth and Linda have explained it, you're now forced to go behind a window 10, 15, 20 feet away. And I don't know about you, I see you're wearing glasses, you see I'm wearing glasses. I don't think I could see a signature 10 or 15 feet away and say, yeah, that's the right signature.
Even when I did see them when we were doing our audit, I'm like, that's not even close. And they were passing them, whatever.
And by the way, the other part is, it's not the responsibility of the post office. It's not their job. It's the responsibility of the registrar of voters of the county and the secretary of state to do the job. The post office gives out mail, takes in mail. They don't really care. It's not up to them. And nowhere in the election law is the post office mentioned as a responsible party for the ballots.
Right. So true. Ken, did you have a question?
Yeah, Gavin Newsom, or the Supreme Leader, as you rightfully call him, has been playing loose with our money. $1 billion contracts to companies that have been in business 3 days without any transparency over face masks, tax dollars to illegals, hotels for the homeless. Are we ever going to be able, after this lockdown is firmly behind us, be able to have any transparency to how all this transpired?
I doubt it. So far, that the $1 billion contract to the Chinese Communist Party controlled firm, they've been unable to deliver the masks, and the prototypes of the masks have not been approved by the FDA. We should get all of our money back from that. Then you have the $457 million contract to a firm of two political operatives who formed a company and 3 days later had a contract. And these are political operatives. I know one of the two men involved, and I don't think he's ever seen the inside of a manufacturing plant in his life. And so there he is, a guy who writes up speeches and TV ads is now getting a contract, $500 million. And then you have the $800 million one to a political public relations firm out of Sacramento, headed by a guy named Fabian Nunez, the former Speaker of the Assembly. And only when that became public did they have to cancel that one. But those are minor, Ken. There are over 400 no-bid contracts that the governor signed. And you're going to say, well, what were those contracts about? You can't be told. The legislature is not being told. He's not even telling the Democrats in the legislature about over 400 contracts, no bid, that he signed. And the Democrats are having a difficult time with this because they know they're going to be asked the question, why didn't you force it out of him? He's your guy. And as a taxpayer, imagine if if a Republican governor did that, they'd be in jail quickly.
Yes. Yes, they would.
Yeah.
With this remote voting, I participated in that online Senate session a few days ago about the remote vote by mail, and it was overwhelming. There was an hour of people calling in to oppose it, and 10 minutes of people supporting it. Can we reverse that? It looks like it's going to be a done deal, but that doesn't allow us to really participate in government.
Well, some of you may not know it. I know you introduced me, and I appreciate the introduction. But some of you don't know that for about 10 years, I was a registered lobbyist in both Washington and Sacramento. And so I'm very familiar with the legislative process. And Ken, if you had come to me as a client and said, I have a bill I want to pass, and you say, well, how do we make sure we get our people heard at a hearing? I would probably laugh at you, because once it gets to a hearing, the decision's already been made. Hearings are just for show because they have to be done. If you don't have the votes going into a hearing, you're not going to get them going out of a hearing, no matter how many talk. So that was just done because they had to do it. And the only reason so many people were allowed to speak out or note their opposition to it was because this was done online, and there are new regulations set by the legislature for online hearings. In a normal circumstance, no more than 5 people would have been heard, and that was it. And you had turned in cards saying whether you support or oppose it, but nobody would know who signed those cards and how many were for and how many against it. So it's not a question of turning it around at the hearings. Literally, it's going to be a lawsuit at the end of the day that will say the voting rolls are so diseased, infected with bad numbers and names. Use the federal judge's decision showing 3 million, which is a large number, and saying that one of 2 things has to happen. One, the federal government takes over the California November election, or 2, a monitor comes in to take over the election process. Anything short of that, and you read my material, and I've said it, we have not had an honest election in California in years.
Thank you.
Question from our fearless leader, Jan. She wants to know if Republican congressional candidates in California are still being coached not to mention Trump.
Yes, they are. They're to talk about their district. And the funny part is, if you're running for Congress, not like city council or school board, you're in for Congress, you're going to have to answer the question, do you support Donald Trump? Because if you're going to Congress, he's going to have a lot of, and he gets reelected, he's going to have a lot of proposals, and are you asking for his endorsement? Well, some of them are not. And they're going to be hurt, because people who are truly supporters of Trump will say, if you're not proud enough to support the president, you're not worthy of my vote.
That is sad. Okay, she had another question. Do you think Republican candidates for state legislature who stand for parental rights can have a chance against the Dems?
I think so. I think what's happened in the last few months with the schools being closed down and forcing the parents to see what the kids are learning. And they are seeing the textbooks now for the first time, because they're having to help the kids with their lessons and with their online tests and quizzes. And so, yes, I think parents are beginning to wise up to the fact that government has abused our kids educationally. And so we're going to see a lot more kids, and I'm watching for the enrollment numbers come August and September to see how much it drops. We already know that most of the big districts are looking for a significant drop in enrollment. LA Unified already has a memo to that effect. that they expect a large drop in enrollment.
Of kids staying out as homeschooled or having
They're
left the
not
state?
coming back to LA Unified schools, and the supposition is some being homeschools. The very wealthy parents are taking their kids into private schools. They thought that, well, I'm a liberal and I want my kid to get a public education. Now they're finding out they're not getting an education at all. And so they're going to send their kids to a private institution, and the productive people are leaving the state.
Yes, that's unfortunate. I can see that in my own neighborhood. Looks like the boss has come back. Thank you. Always interesting, Steve.
Hey, Steve, we really appreciate you coming. I mean, I lost track of the time, and Wendy had to send me a text because I'm like,
Can we keep
so
going?
interesting. And so thank you so much. We certainly would love to have you back at some point if you're willing. I mean, this is like the most educational thing, because our
Really?
people, I'm going to say the majority of the people in Santa Clara County Republicans have no idea how screwed up the California Republican Party is. And when they say, what's wrong with the Republican Party, they have no idea. And we probably don't even know enough of how bad it is. So I thank you. I thank you for your leadership, because, hey, 12 of us were elected to the Republican Central Committee. And that was really thanks for you starting, a year and a half ago, to say, you guys need to run. You need to run. And so they're not happy we won, but hey, we intend, we're searching right now to find candidates to run for local office. We're trying to fix the election integrity issues. We're trying to register voters, and we're not even on the committee yet. So I hope they see that, we're there to work and not just to do whatever, what they do. So thank you very much. And thank you, Ken, for stepping in here. You were great. And thanks, Wendy. And we hope we see all of you next Friday for Economic Armageddon.
Economic Armageddon. That'll be interesting.
And hey, if you got time, join our sit-in, our luncheon, so to speak, at Casa Lupe at